This is Charlotte Gill, and in this video we will be covering how to locate Singapore legislation. Before we begin, it's important to cover the different types or categories of legislation. First and foremost, we have the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. Then we have statutes, or we can refer to them as acts. These are the laws that are passed through Parliament and given presidential assent. Right? Each act is given its own chapter number. So when you see a reference in your reading list, it will usually appear, for instance, as Companies Act, Chapter 50, CAP being short for chapter. The clue that you're dealing with the statute is usually the word act. However, there are some exceptions. For instance, the Women's Charter and the Penal Code are also statutes. The next major category is subsidiary legislation. While acts deal with the broad legal principles, the associated subsidiary legislation deals with the nitty-gritty details, procedures, and administrative matters. These are the standards, etc., that need to be in place in order to implement what has been laid out in the Act. Now, these rules and regulations are issued usually by the relevant ministry or minister, and the authority has been given by the Act that has been passed in Parliament. When you look at the reference for subsidiary legislation, you'll see reference to the main act, in this case companies, and then a more detailed description of the specific provision, in this case Application of Bankruptcy Act provisions, regulations. So here the keywords that you look out for are rules or regulations that give you a clue that you're dealing with subsidiary legislation. So where can we locate Singapore laws? Well, you can locate them in a database called LawNet, which is the Singapore law database. However, in this particular instance, I would strongly recommend you go to the website Singapore Statutes Online. This is a free website. The content is produced by the Attorney General's Chambers. And it's exactly the same as the content on LawNet. In fact, LawNet draws its content from Singapore Statutes Online. So in terms of being efficient, it's probably best just to go to Singapore Statutes Online when you're looking for current legislation. So let's take a look at Singapore Statutes Online. Now there are a few ways you can locate what you need. Let's give you an example. Let's assume you are looking for the Legal Profession Act, Chapter 161, Section 2. How would we go about doing that? Now, I wouldn't recommend a keyword search simply because this would be searching the full text of all legislation within the database. In this case, I would suggest that you select Current Acts. As you mentioned, it's a Legal Profession Act, so you know you're dealing with the Act, not a subsidiary legislation. You can either browse the alphabetical listing, L for legal profession, or you can search by chapter number. In this case, it's 161. Right? Now, if you search by chapter number, what it will retrieve is not only the Act, but all the associated subsidiary legislation. Hence why you see S, this little icon with the S symbol, and you'll see rules, etc. So you'll see lots of subsidiary legislation. If you want to go straight to the Act, just click on the left-hand side under chapter number, click 161, and it will bring you to the Legal Profession Act. Now you'll notice on the left-hand side is the table of contents. All of the provisions within the Act are referred to as sections. So in this particular case, if I wanted to look at Section 2, I'll click on the link, and the full text of Section 2 will be displayed on the right-hand side of the screen. If you wanted to view several distinct sections, you could select, for instance, Section 10, Section 14, and 15, and click Get Provisions. It would then retrieve the relevant provisions you selected on the right-hand side as shown. Okay. Alternatively, you can select whole document and it will display the entire Act on the right-hand side. Now, what about if you're looking for subsidiary legislation? Again, here we know we're dealing with subsidiary legislation as we can see the word rules, and that gives us a good clue that we're dealing with subsidiary legislation. Now, there's more than one way to do this. We can either, as we know we are dealing with the legal profession, okay, the Legal Profession Act, you can click on Related Subsidiary Legislation, and look for Rule 15, Legal Profession Qualified Persons Rules. Again, if you click on the link, it will display the full text with the relevant sections on the left and the full text on the right. The schedules are always at the end. Now, another way to locate current subsidiary legislation will be to go back to the homepage of Statutes Online. Let's say we were looking for the casino control advertising regulations. All right, so we best to select Browse. We're dealing with subsidiary legislation, so we have to change the drop-down menu, and we select C for casino control advertising regulations. You scroll down the alphabetical list. You will see it here. Click on the link, and again you will see the sections on the left and the full text on the right. So it's fairly straightforward from here. If you have any questions, again, just email library@smu.edu.sg and we'll be happy to answer your questions.